Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Hope I'm audible. My name is Gloria Bavidye from the Communications Unit, FIDA Uganda. We shall be starting our webinar soon. Let's just give 3 minutes to whoever will be joining to join us, and then we'll kick off. Thank you. Good afternoon once again. Thank you so much for making the time to join our webinar this afternoon. This webinar is organized under the Iceland funded project, which is enhancing access to gender responsive justice and agency building for women and girls in Buvuma and Namayingo districts of Uganda, implemented by FIDA Uganda. Island districts such as Buvuma and Namayingo present unique challenges to Uganda's justice system. Most of their populations live on scattered islands across Lake Victoria, with communities concentrated in fishing villages and offshore sub-counties. Just their geographical location alone makes them susceptible to issues such as limited access to justice, and even if they do access it, sometimes it's delayed. And this is why we convened this afternoon to sort of address this, and we shall have Patience Pony, a FIDA Uganda member, moderate this conversation. So over to you, Patience, to get the conversation started. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much, Gloria, for introducing me and for giving us briefly what we are going to discuss about today. Good afternoon, listeners. Thank you so much for joining us on this FIDA Uganda webinar on addressing prosecutorial and judicial gaps in the island communities, as ably mentioned by Gloria. I'm excited for this conversation, and I think I already see some of our panelists on board. I am not seeing a few. Abby and Gloria, kindly coordinate so that we ensure that all our panelists are on board, and then we can start engaging them. On my end, to those who are joining in and might not know me, my name is Patience Pony Aikoru. Once again, I am a lawyer by profession and a member of FIDA Uganda. I currently work at the Equal Opportunities Commission, and I am passionate about issues to do with human rights, women's rights, and access to justice. Today, I will be your moderator, and my main role is to guide our conversation. And just for your timing purposes, we are going to have briefly an introduction about our panelists, and then we'll dive into the conversation to understand what exactly are these gaps that are there impeding access to justice for GBV survivors in these uh, island areas, especially Buvuma and Namayingo. And in line with that, we shall also find solutions to these issues to access to justice, and how best can we move forward as FIDA Uganda, as members of FIDA Uganda, friends of FIDA Uganda, and different stakeholders that are joining us on this webinar. And then in the end, we'll have also a few questions from you. So in case you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but also feel free to raise your hand, and then you'll be given an opportunity at the right time. At this particular point, I would like to introduce my panel. We are having a panel of three guests. One is Miss Chebijira Esther. I hope I am pronouncing the name correctly, Madam Esther. Miss Chebijira Esther is a state attorney at the Office of the Directorate of Public Prosecution in Lugazi, at the Lugazi station. So we have our state attorney Esther, who we are going to hear from so much, especially about the prosecution bit of it all. What exactly goes unleft? What are the constraints that are there? What are the gaps? What are the successes, if any, that we can note and take forward? And our second panelist is a deputy ASP Sengozi Emi, who is a police officer, but also a deputy ASP at the district CID. This is the Criminal Investigation Department in Namayingo district. And we're going to hear from his perspective, from the law enforcement perspective, what it takes to, to ensure justice is accessed by people in Namayingo, but also best practices within the island areas, because I know he is in coordination with all these officers and law enforcers. And then very lastly, we have Mr. Muchelule Dismas, who is a magistrate. Your Worship, he's a magistrate in charge at Namayingo Chief Magistrates Court. So we are also going to hear from His Worship Dismas about what happens in the courts of law, or even in the process of the chain of custody from the police, from the DPP, and then to the courts, and how justice eventually is dispensed for the people who are in these island areas of Buvuma and Namayingo. And please be aware that our webinar today is funded by the Embassy of Iceland, and we are excited about this conversation. So having mentioned the panelists today, I would like to call upon Ms. Chebijira Esther to take us on with our first point of engagement, as we get our other panelists on board, because I think I do not see His Worship Dismas on board, unless I have missed it. And then our ASP, Mr. Emmy, I'm also not seeing him on board yet. So Esther, I'm going to put you in the spotlight very soon. And just Esther, as you come, for those listening, really, today, when we speak about island communities, they face unique challenges, justice challenges arising first from their geographical isolation. As you know, we have a number of islands in Uganda, and among these for our conversation today is Buvuma and Namayingo Island. And beyond the geographical isolation, they also have limited judicial presence. There's a lot of staffing gaps that are there, as you will hear from our panelists, and much more of these gaps that are there. But then they also have difficulties in, documentation of some of these cases that are pertinent and crucial, but also cases that affect women and children and the marginalized communities. So in today's conversation, we are going to have to listen to these actors tell us about, to reflect on these challenges, to discuss these practical reforms that we can do to improve justice delivery in island communities, but also to highlight the pertinent work that FIDA Uganda is doing. So I think we have all our panelists on board. Madam Esther Chebira, who is with the Office of the DPP, I would like to ask you the first question, really. Feel free to introduce yourself and tell us the work that you do at the Office of DPP, because I know many people here are lawyers, but some are also well-wishers and friends of FIDA Uganda and might not understand the gravity of the prosecution perspective from your office. What, as you respond to briefly what you do at your office in as far as dispensing justice is in those communities, the very first question I'll give you is, what is the most significant barrier that you face in effecting prosecution of cases, especially in island communities? Over to you, Esther.
Thank you, Miss Connie. Patience, I hope I have also put your name right.
Yes, please.
Time, but you didn't get it right the second time, but it's okay. My name is Esther Chebijira, and I work as a state at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and I sit at Lugazi. I have been working at the ODPP from 2023. Our station at Lugazi covers Lugazi, which is under Buyikwe district, but we also caretaker Buvuma district. And just a glimpse of what we do. We prosecute cases, and I think many of us know that looks at the point when cases have come to court. But even before they come to court, we work with police to direct investigations as guided by Article 120 of the Constitution of Uganda, 1995, as amended. So that is basically what we do. We guide investigation of criminal by police. When investigations are concluded, they are taken to court and we prosecute them. So that is a general glimpse of what we do. And I don't know, Patience, how much time I have, or I can speak as long as I want.
Well, Madam Esther, you have about 5 minutes to tell us a few of the significant challenges that you have faced within, the prosecutory chain, and whether you have absence of state attorneys. Do you have enough staff to handle these cases, as you respond to the challenges that you will highlight?
Okay, so like I said, we sit in Lugazi. So that means that Buvuma, which is a different district from Buyukwe district where we sit in, does not have a state attorney. That means that if investigations are concluded in files and in case files and they require sanctioning or legal advice from state attorneys, which is what the law requires, the files must be brought up to Lugazi where we sit. Now, for those of us in this webinar that do not know, you cannot access Buvuma district without going through Lake Victoria. So which means you need a ferry or some form of transport through water. So that is a very, very big challenge. For files to reach our offices, for sanctioning, or even just to give legal advice, direction on what police should do is I think one of the biggest challenges. Because if a state attorney has not looked at the file, then how will it go to court? How will police probably know whether they have gathered enough evidence or not. So the lack of a state attorney, a resident state attorney at Buvuma district, one of the biggest challenges, but also accessibility, even for them to access us from Buvuma to Lugasi is also a very big challenge. And just Buvuma itself, I may be corrected by anyone in the webinar, but I think Buvuma has about 59 islands within water, so you can only access that through water. And every file from those islands must be able to reach Lugazi. You can imagine the difficulty with getting those files to Lugazi where we sit. And then also the other major challenge is even getting witnesses to court. Semi-capital offenses or cases of a semi-capital nature are had at Lugazi Chief Magistrate's Court because Buvuma doesn't have a chief magistrate. So that would mean that witnesses from all of those 59 islands who, for this case, because we're looking at SGBV, who are victims of SGBV, have to travel all the way from Buvuma up to Lugazi. And you may all know that would involve transport, accommodation, feeding. Yes, so the challenges are many, but I would state that for now. Miss Patience, over to you.
Thank you so much, Miss Esther, for sharing with us, some of these challenges. And as you mentioned, indeed, Buvuma Island is one of the largest islands in Uganda. So you can imagine the population and kind of workload that has to come with dispensing justice, but also in your office, of prosecution. It's a lot. Before I let you go, I just have a follow-up question, because you've mentioned a few of these challenges, including accessibility for people from Buvuma to Lugazi, the lack of a state attorney. For those that have just joined us, Miss Esther has been sharing with us from her perspective at the office of DPP, what exactly they are facing in strengthening prosecution services for these the communities in the island areas. So maybe, Miss Esther, could you please mention to us some of the impact that you're seeing, on these delays, that this impact on survivors of sexual gender-based violence and witness participation? I know you've mentioned one on the aspect of accessibility, but I'm sure there is broader impacts within your office that you've observed that maybe us as the listeners can take note of in as far as understanding the challenges of prosecution. Madam Esther.
Thank you, Patience. Well, as I already indicated, if you're not going to have these witnesses participate effectively in the trial of their cases, it means that they are not going to access justice. And if they're not going to access justice, it means many suspects will walk away scot-free. Because, for example, if I have 10 cases in court from Buvuma at the Chief Magistrate's Court, and I do not have any of them, it means all the suspects, eventually some of them are given, bail, will return to court, and eventually the cases will be dismissed out of prosecution, because then we shall not be able to produce witnesses. But also for some of them that, they can't keep them in, even if they don't give the suspects, for example, bail. His worship Dismas will tell you that you're not going to keep them in court forever. So eventually the matters will be dismissed for want of prosecution. So if the case is dismissed for want of prosecution, it means our victims are not going to get justice. But even in cases where you're going to have them come to court, they have not eaten because maybe they don't have money to buy lunch, then they came very early in the ferry, so they did not probably eat. You're not going to have very quality evidence.
True.
You struggle to get the evidence out of them, but also even some of that evidence they report the cases late. Some of them are tested for, the medical examination is done late after so many days. So in some cases, you're not even going to get that DNA evidence, or the form is filled and probably not filled well, because also the medical officers are getting to these people late. So at the end of the day, justice is not served and our victims will not get justice. But also, they are now forced to explore other out-of-court case settlement mechanisms. Some of them are taken advantage of. They pay them probably. I hear that some of them they are forced to settle, and yet that these cases of SGBV are not cases that you should be settling out of court. But because of, imagine someone imagines, how will I get to Lugazi? The transport, the food, where am I going to sleep? And yet the family of the suspect is offering them some little money, as little as 100,000 shillings. Chances are very high that they are going to accept that money. And that is not justice. Some of them, for example, if you're looking at very young kids, as young as 8 years old, if their parents sit, the money will end up in the pockets of the parents. Some of these kids may not get them, but also that trauma that they are going to live with. They will not have an opportunity to speak out, to see their offenders get punished for the acts, for the trauma that they imposed on them. So it has far-reaching impacts on survivors. Sometimes if you're going to, for example, be engaged in plea bargain sessions, which we do, sometimes you can't get these witnesses, patients, and colleagues in the panel. You're not going to get them. Some of them, they shift. Police officers will tell you, or even the process servers will tell you, state, we can't get these people. They relocated because, those islands, most of the work people do there is fishing. Those are fishing communities, and so they keep relocating to other islands. So if the information you have on the police file, when you go back on Google, you will not find them, because and we are grateful to what FIDA is doing. It is now supporting some of our victims. But then even when they go on ground, they'll not find them because they have shifted. So at the end of the day, the cases will not be heard.
Will not be heard, yeah.
Yes, so eventually they will not fully participate in a plea bargain. And you do not get the full participation because you can't have them, you can't bring them on board because you cannot locate them. So yes, that is just some of the impact that I can point out. Thank you, Patience. Over to
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Esther, for sharing. And I love how you're very passionate about these issues, because you highlighted some of the very drastic challenges that survivors of SGBV are facing. And for those who are listening in, you realize that it's beyond a justice issue. It's also, governance around there. It trickles down onto other forms of service delivery within those communities. So I really hope that we are taking keen note of whatever is being mentioned, because we are listening firsthand to the people that speak to these survivors and also are in this chain of, custody of information. So thank you so much, Miss Esther. I am going to move on to Your Worship Dismas. Your Worship Dismas, you're a magistrate in charge of Namayingo Chief Magistrates Court. And ideally, people know that, the courts of law is where justice gets to be deliberated. We want you to really explore, the realities of administering justice in these island areas, and most especially highlighting Namayingo district. What is happening there? My question to you, Your Worship, the first question maybe that you would respond to is, what does a typical day look like in your chambers when you're addressing issues of SGBV for island communities? And a second bit of the question is, what are the realities of administering justice in these geographically isolated communities? What challenges are there beyond your typical day as a chief magistrate?
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Mucherude Dismas, and I thank you so much, moderator, Patience Aikoru, and the panelists. Also, thank you so much, FIDA Uganda, for organizing this forum. My name is Mucherude Dismas. I am the magistrate in charge of Namayingo Chief Magistrates Court. I am not actually a chief magistrate yet, but I'm a magistrate in charge
Oh,
of
yeah.
Namayingo Chief Magistrates Court.
Okay, we bless you to be a CM very soon.
I mean, thank you so much. Yes. On this forum, first of all, I must say I'm privileged to be part of this discussion and webinar. Now, from our perspective, we are talking about it in the context of Namayingo district. Namayingo district is, I believe, will be larger than Buvuma Island because we have both the mainland and the islands themselves, but have a number of islands. So my role as, I'm going to discuss my role as a judicial officer, but just to give you a picture of Namayingo and how it looks like. Namayingo district has a number of islands, several of them located in the Namayingo district. But yes, it has both the mainland and also the islands which are located on Lake Victoria. So we are looking at some of the commonest islands, or you call them the major ones in terms of economic activities and the way they are inhabited. They are mainly Seguro Islands, Seguro Island, and then the Lolo Islands. Others call it Lolo Island. Yes. Now, first of all, when you talk about the question of how does a typical day look like especially when you are dealing with SGBV cases involving SGBV, I want to bring it to your attention that first of all, the SGBV cases involve, there are a number of them. They involve, first of all, cases of defilement, aggravated defilement, rape, some of which are beyond my jurisdiction, some are handled like for defilement. It's normally handled by the chief magistrate. And then for rape, that one's for the High Court. But we're also looking at other aspects of SGBV, that is to do with domestic violence, that is to do with assaults, targeting, of course, the female gender. We are looking at such cases. But basically, whether I have the jurisdiction to handle some of the cases or not, we see some things still cutting across. For example, when you look at how does a typical SGBV day, how does a typical day of handling SGBV cases look like? First of all, we see a kind of sometimes test up situation because you're talking about the people that are coming to your court to access justice. Some of these cases, some of these people actually are coming from the island communities. Now, as they come from the island communities, we are looking at, first of all, the difficulties that arise when they are coming to the courts of law. They come, first of all, late. They come tensed up. They come a bit disorganized. They are coming without the witnesses, as the state has actually mentioned, without the witnesses. And then you find it's a complainant in the court. Perhaps the complainant has testified, but there are no witnesses. So why? Because it is basically very difficult to travel across these islands. Some of these islands take about 4 or 5 hours on the water alone. And then when they add the journey on the mainland, it's some good number of hours for them to come. Actually, when we fix these cases for hearing, say to start hearing at 9 a.m., most likely you will not have those witnesses coming from Lolwe Islands and the Seguro Islands, plus those other small islands. You will not have them because they will not be there. It is practically not possible. Their days are dictated by the movements of the ferry, and so you have to really give them time. Sometimes we, like State Esther has mentioned, we are forced actually to adjourn and adjourn and adjourn, but of course we cannot adjourn forever. So you find you have given someone the last adjournment, but still they cannot still come with the witnesses. Why? Because it is practically difficult to travel across the waters. You don't have the courts of law on those islands. None of those islands has actually a court of law, though some of them, like Sigulu Island, has been gazetted as a court, but in actual sense, we don't have a court, we don't have a judicial officer. So they go through a lot. By the time they arrive in our courts of law, they are looking weary, tensed up, and perhaps some want to even almost want to give up because it is difficult for themselves to come to court and also to transport the witnesses. Now, when you talk about the witnesses, especially the expert witnesses for cases like assaults, of course, sexual offenses like defilement and others, those ones, it is difficult. We need them to fill those police them to actually adduce those police forms. Those police forms are not filled by anybody else apart from the medical experts, and the experts are also not available. First of all, it is difficult for them to transport themselves. Secondly, it's difficult for them to transport the witnesses. We have had engagements where we are told that even the medical officers who fill those police forms 3 and others, they sometimes also need the transport, which is also sometimes not available to them, and they end up getting it from the victims. So it's a typical day of hearing cases involving SDBV cases really is a test up one. Sometimes they are not sure of what is going to be the outcome. Sometimes as the courts of law, we understand, but when you don't have the evidence, when you don't have witnesses, you're forced to dismiss the cases. That is it on one part. And the other part, when you talk about the realities of administrative injustice in geographically isolated island communities, we are looking at the island communities tend to report few cases in our courts. Why? Because, first of all, we are talking about the isolation itself, the physical barriers. The islands are isolated from the mainland, and it's very difficult to access the mainland. So because of that, many of them are kind of detached. The communities there are a bit backward, characterized by poverty and illiteracy, high rates of illiteracy because of high school dropout. Because of the nature of communities, it's a fishing community, and therefore many of the children in the communities are diverted into fishing, but also because of poverty and other factors. So you find these communities tend to be laid back and to be off the formal justice systems. So many of them tend to report few cases because they tend to solve cases in their communities, but also because of the physical barriers, the way they are detached, because of poverty, the difficulty in terms of transport, the physical accessibility to our courts of law. Many of them now prefer to negotiate in the communities, including in the case of defilement and others, even without sometimes reporting to police. And because of that, you find that a few cases are rising from the island, and therefore that becomes a very hard reality when it comes to administrative justice in those island communities. Then there's also high rate of ignorance in the communities, especially around the island areas. And as such, many people are not aware of the law and their rights. When we are dealing with an ignorant community, it is said that it is easy to control ignorant people. So because of that, they are not aware, for example, that when they are assaulted, when there's domestic violence, they are not aware that you report. They know that you use the local structures within the LC systems, the clan systems. Whether the matter is beyond them, they don't know. They resolve these issues, including sexual offenses. So it's not until they know the law that these matters are supposed to be resolved through the legal systems, and until they are aware of their rights, that's when they can actually pick up the courage to actually report cases in the formal justice systems. Now, majority of the people, the other thing is that majority of the people in the district are poor and cannot afford court services. We have had a number of engagements for this Form 3. Just a person reporting a case to police and is told to access the police Form 3 to get the police form 3 and present it to the hospital for medical examination. The person finds it difficult. Now, a police form 3 is just a mere copy, just one page of, okay, not one page, about 3 pages. But the person finds it very difficult to actually access such a form because the person says, I don't have the money. Now, because of poverty, even things like now, police form 3s are a problem. Now, without a police form 3, as a judicial officer, if the person is not examined on police form 3 and or is examined, or somehow he has failed to be examined, or he or she has been examined on police form 3 and has failed now to come to court and bring the witness, that is a medical expert, the medical expert who examined this person. Once that form is not there and the person who has examined the victim is not there, I have no option but actually to make the relevant decision. That is, in most cases, of course, such a case will fail. The perpetrator will go scot-free just because of that kind of loophole. But because of the hard reality of poverty that is affecting people. Now, when it comes to court filing fees, for example, let me just give you an example of cases such as cases of maintenance. If I may go into cases of maintenance, for instance, maintenance cases, someone is coming to our courts of law, and they have struggled all the way to come through the islands. Someone has to, first of all, pay filing fees. Then he has to have the documents drafted. That means, ideally, these are documents drafted by lawyers. Then the person doesn't even have the transport to come to court. The person has probably been sponsored by someone else. Now you're talking about filing fees, you're talking about drafting court papers. Then at the end of the day, some of them struggle and go up to that level, and the courts of law will give order for maintenance order, monthly maintenance payment of say 80,000, and the judgment creditor, who is usually the husband anyway, has failed to pay the 80,000 for 3 months. That's about 240,000. You tell this person for execution, in order for us to arrest this person, stay in execution. That is the judgment data. Again, the judgment creditor, who is entitled to that, to receive that 80,000 per month, and who is now supposed to receive 240, say for 3 months, has again to look for a court bailiff in order for the execution process to be completed. Now, look, our people in the islands can hardly afford their own transport. They can hardly transport their own witnesses. And we're talking about paying a court bailiff who will ask 1 million shillings, 500,000, whatever the amount. You find that it's practically impossible. That is why, when you look at the general trend of people applying for, say, maintenance, we hardly get people from the island. It is too expensive for them. Now, that is a very serious reality on the ground. Now, the other one is in regards to juvenile justice. The other reality, which is a hard reality, the nearest remand home is in Bali. Now, we're looking at the parents of such juveniles, for instance. When they want to go and see their person apply for bail, they have to go up to Bali. It is, first of all, difficult for the person from Lolo Islands to come to the mainland court. Now you're talking about going to Bali. That becomes And likewise, these very juveniles are also charged with offenses of different kinds, commonly theft and child-to-child sex and whatever. Now, you're looking at, there's no, the witnesses, the victims can hardly come to court to testify. Now you're talking about, now even the remand home itself is in Bali, and they hardly bring these people to court for trial. What does it mean? We keep adjourning when it is now too much, beyond what is permissible. We end up dismissing these cases of juveniles. Actually, since I came to Namayingo in January, I have not practically had the case of juveniles prosecuted through hearing in court. Every time we remand them to the remand home in Bali, that is it. They hardly come back. The remand home will tell you we have no fuel. Now, those are the practical realities in Namayingo as we speak now. Now, of course, it has to do with we don't have the We don't have courts on the islands as we are speaking right now. We only have gazetted court, say, on Suguru Island, but it's not operationalized. So there's no judicial officer. There's no court. So when you talk about the right to fair hearing, the reality on the ground is that the persons from the islands are really going through difficulties, serious difficulties, when it comes to physical accessibility. One of the tenets of fair hearing under Article 28 of our Constitution, you realize that fair hearing is also about not just when you talk about things to do with speedy trial and other, but one of the key tenets of fair hearing is actually that the aspect of provision of physical accessibility to the courts of law
True.
and
Yeah.
criminal justice systems. Now, we have the court is on the mainland, but we don't have the courts the other side on the islands. And some of these islands, you need more than 5 hours for them to travel. Now, it is so expensive for them. Who foots that? So at the end of the day, if we could only have the courts on those 2 islands, at least for the beginning, there are many, but if we could have the most active islands like Lore and Siguru, if we could at least have the court systems, that becomes
True.
A very, very, very good intervention. Otherwise, the reality is so hard on the ground for those communities to access justice.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Worship. And I wanted to cut you short there because you are going to come at a later time to give us some of those solutions that you're already suggesting. But I hope that listeners are really learning a lot from what you're sharing because, earlier we heard from State Esther, the prosecution issues and challenges that are there. And then now in the court system, you've also shared with us a lot of these challenges and mainly around accessibility. And many times we are aware that access to justice is not a luxury. It is a fundamental right and the foundation upon which, all the other rights depend. So if people are unable to access courts or to even go to Mbale or even having few judicial officers, that means the whole chain of justice has a lot of issues. And there's just a lot we could talk about. Unfortunately, today we have very limited time, but colleagues, let's listen in at a later time. If you have a burning comment or question, please feel free to put it in the chat. We'll read it in about 6 minutes from now, as I'm going to invite ASP Emmy is going to share with us, what happens on investigations, the investigative part of it all. But before I get to ASP Emmy, I just wanted to re-echo what His Worship has mentioned. And for me, I want to summarize what His Worship has mentioned into this one phrase, that courts, prosecutors, legal aid service providers, police, and all these correctional services or prisons and juvenile centers or remand homes are links in one chain. So when one link is weak, justice for all is weakened. You had His Worship mentioning about the chain of movement. Once that one is weak, you will have no people to listen to. When PF3 is not available or affordable even to the people, then they're not going to report cases and they're going to resort to so many other means to access justice. So the reality is there, and it's very sad. And before we move on to the last phase of asking about possible solutions from the panelists, I just want us to hear from ASP Emmy. ASP Emmy, you've worked a lot, around investigations, and from what we have heard from the past 2 panelists, evidence is very important and crucial in accessing justice. But we have also already heard about the geographical barriers. Now, the question I would like to give you first is really a run-on question from the first 2. One of these is, what are the major policing challenges that you face in investigating crimes and supporting survivors in island communities? Because I know these islands are scattered around. So what are these challenges that you face in police while trying to investigate crimes? And then very lastly, what gaps do you have in case documentation? Because the police is basically the first point of contact for most of these people in the island communities. So what is the reality on ground? Over to you, ASP Emmy.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Detective ASP Sengon's Emmy. That D is disturbing. It is not deputy.
It is detective.
Yes, so
Okay.
it means he's an investigator.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm a police officer working in Namayingo district as district CID. As the two panelists who have discussed, some of the challenges they face, they are the same challenges we have. Only for them, they get a bit of it. So to start with, the challenge of transport, that is inadequate transport in island areas, it is really a serious problem. Those islands, they are not near each other. And we don't have functional boats there. Because when you are moving on waters, you need boats. Even if you have a motorcycle to just move on that small island, you cannot cross in case if a case is on another island, you cannot cross with a motorcycle, you need a boat. So those ones we don't have. But as the police, we have some fuel, but the fuel may not be enough to do the work. So we get it because those stations like Rolwe, Sigulu, every month they get some fuel, which is around 120, but it may not be enough. So that one is still a problem, the inadequate transport. Then another challenge is of manpower. That one is an institutional problem. Uganda is big. The number of police officers, they are very few. So we cannot be the only people to get enough manpower. So we have that gap there, especially of detectives to investigate those cases. And when we come to Child and Family Protection Unit, also we need specialized people trained to handle such cases. So we don't have enough of them. For example, on all those islands, there are very many. We have only one a CFP officer at an island called Kandeg, and he's a male. And as you are aware, most of those cases to be best investigated, we need the female officers who are not there at the moment. Then also, when we come to wiki documentation, we have forms. Forms are there, but they are not enough. And if they are not enough, that means the office on the ground, what he can do, he can get that one copy he has in the office to photocopy. And if he has no money now to photocopy that form, now the burden will shift to the survivor. As you know, other discussants have already told you, our survivors are very poor. They cannot afford that. But I'm happy that these days, FIDA has assisted us to cover that gap. So that one is also a big challenge. Wiki documentation, shortage of the forms, and if you are to photocopy also, because there is no electricity that side, people use generators, they charge highly, and you need to copy. So our people cannot manage. So that one, as we as investigators, we are facing it as a challenge. So I think in the meantime, I can tell you those three: the inadequate transport, the manpower challenge, and the wiki documentation. Really, they affect us in my district in terms of investigating those cases. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Detective Amy, for sharing that. And like you said, when you mentioned the challenge of movement, in my mind, I was asking myself, how how urgent even police response to some cases, in terms of emergency. For example, on the island, how fast? What is the time spent? For example, how long do you think police usually takes to reach there for rescue? Do you have that documented somewhere? Do you have information on that? And then maybe just a follow-up question, Detective, is what are some of the highest number of cases that you often receive from the people in the island community at the police? What are the highest number of cases?
Thank you, moderator. The common cases, they are defilement cases. Defilement cases, then the general domestic violence, fighting in homes. Those are the most cases received. There are some rape cases there, but they are not very many. Yes.
Okay, then. And then maybe just one last one before we go back to State Esther is how long do you think it takes for police to reach the people usually? Do they take like one full day? For example, if they hear a case today, do they go up to tomorrow? Do they take a few hours? What is that situation? Because you mentioned there is a challenge of the transport, but that would help us to know how fast they actually receive response from police.
Thank you. By our standard operating procedures, we are supposed to use 15 minutes. If it is a scene of crime, you must be there within 15 minutes. That is the standard countrywide. But now for our islands, as you have mentioned, it can even take 2 days to reach there. And by the time you reach, witnesses have left the place. Evidence is tampered with. Example, if it is a rape case, maybe once some semen is around the place, you find they are already expired. Suspects have ran away, they have already crossed to another country. So really, it depends on the distance from where the police is and where the scene is. But it is between 5 hours to 2 days, as you have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Detective. Really, first of all, for really your time on this webinar, but also for sharing the reality on ground without, holding back. Because many times everyone has a department and they want to, portray the best of it. But thank you for being open and also showing the vulnerability in the work. So I'll just ask one more question to the panelists, and then I'll move to the audience. And this question really, State Esther, is on what policy reforms or what solutions do you think would really work for issues on prosecution? You mentioned to us the challenges earlier, but then are there any solutions that you think would particularly work for your office as ODPP? State Esther?
Thank you, Patience. Yeah, I am going to make a few proposals.
Okay.
I am hoping that all of us will come up with proposals and solutions on this webinar so that we make, access to justice by SGB victims very accessible. For me, if the biggest challenge that I noticed with Buvuma, even if tomorrow they sent there a resident state attorney, I don't know where they would stay because they don't even have infrastructure. It's unfortunate that I have not seen his worship Talemwa on this webinar, but if you went to where the court sits, you would be shocked. So they do not have structures. We have heard that I think they have got land and hopefully judiciary will build structures. We are looking forward to that. So first, they need to deal with the issue. We need to deal with the issue of lack of infrastructure, offices, where even if staff are to be deployed there, I would have where to sit and stay. And then also enhance or maybe give put there enhance the magistrate grade 1 court to probably be a chief magistrate's court, so that now we reduce on the need for survivors and their witnesses to travel from Buvuma up to Lugazi like they do today. Because if we take the court closer to them, then we will halfway solve the issue of the need for transport accommodation, feeding, and all the attendance issues. So we need a court, a chief magistrate's court at Buvuma to handle cases, the semi-capital cases, and even, and committals and all of those things. And if because even if judiciary has structures there, I am sure they wouldn't mind sharing with the office of the DPP. Yeah, but also there is need for all of us to lobby for enhanced staffing. We need more staff because generally at the ODPP, I am not the PRO, but it is known that we have staffing gaps. So we need to lobby for more staff so that even if we are not yet stationed there, even us here, we would be enough so that when they bring files here, we are able to sanction them, read, peruse them, advise on time. Because, for example, if we have high court sessions here, because now we have a high court at Lugazi, if we have high court sessions and we are all engaged in the session, it means that we will not peruse those files as soon as they arrive or as fast as we should. Because if I am in high court for the whole week, not to mention that we also have other courts. We serve 6 magistrates here at Lugazi, both Lugazi and Buyukwe, because we have a chief magistrates court also at Buyukwe, and they also do not have state attorneys. And just for clarity, we are 3 state attorneys. So that means we are serving the High Court, we are serving 6 magistrates, and you also add perusing files from Buvuma, but also perusing files from within Lugazi and Buyukwe. So yes, so if we have enhanced number of staff, then we shall reduce on the time of staying with files to peruse and to give advice. But also, we will then be able to, it will be easier even if someone has to, go to Buvuma and handle cases from there. Just for information, we have a state prosecutor who prosecutes cases at the magistrate grade 1's court at Buvuma. So we do not go there at all to prosecute cases. He helps us to prosecute cases that fall within the jurisdiction of the magistrate grade 1. So yes, the issue of staffing gaps and the lack of structures will definitely go a long way in improving access to justice and just enabling our victims to see that justice has been done. But also, I think His Worship mentioned the issue of police form 3As, and also I think the district CID Namayingo. We need to, I think, also put effort in availing some of these police form 3As to the CIDs, so that it is easier for them to issue out the forms without sometimes requiring witnesses who victims already do not have any money to go and photocopy them, and in those island areas they don't have power. So then photocopying from some of those kiosks which are very far, which use generators, is very expensive. They already do not have the money before. In one of our last meetings, our colleagues from FIDA told us that they are doing their best to support in that area, and we are grateful. So we pray that the same will continue. But also we need to have, I think, time and train our medical personnel on filling of police form 3A. Many of them, especially at the level of the medical officers, clinical officers, know how to fill these forms much better. But as you may know, that in those island districts, some of those health centers are probably headed by nursing officers who many of them may not know how to fill the forms very well. Someone fills a form and you are wondering, I mean, did you actually examine this victim? It is not a useful form. You can't even tender it in court. So maybe we may also put in sensitizing some of the lower cadres not necessarily the medical officers, the doctors, the clinical officers at that level, but the lower cadres who are in the lowest health centers in some of those areas, so that we have forms that are going to be useful in court. And I don't know how police can be helped to manage the issue of, of transport, because the distance for them, you can send back a file for further inquiry and you're going to get it back after 3 weeks, because the island is somewhere in the Liabana, very deep, where it takes them 6 hours to access from the police post or the police station. So I think they also need support in that area in terms of facilitation, in terms of movement. And I heard his worship saying for them they have mobile courts in Namayingo. I do not think that we have that in some of those islands in Buvuma. Maybe that is also something that we can lobby for, we can advocate for, and maybe we shall see access to justice for
Some
our victims.
improvement.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think I would say that for now. But also before I go over our patients, the issue
Yes,
of
that.
attending court. I think that probably we need to do a lot of sensitization so that members of the community know that cases do not just stop at reporting them at police. Because I think some of them think that the fact that you have reported the case to police, that's all. They never follow up, they never show up in court. So I think they need to understand the whole chain of how
Mm.
is managed from police to court. Sometimes, obviously, they take long in court. For example, capital cases, aggravated defilement, rape. Chances of a case being concluded within 3 years are not very high. So obviously there will be time, there will be frustrations, but I think if they have that kind of information, they will be patient. They will know that sending a person to prison is not enough. You need to go through the entire chain and have the matter concluded, testify in court, but also support them in terms of transport. I cannot get tired of thanking FIDA enough. You are really supporting in this area so much. You are supporting some of our witnesses. At least I know that because we are already benefiting from that. But let's continue. Let's continue to give them support in that area. Ensure that they are able to report those cases at police, but also eventually come to court. I think those would be my proposals for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, State, for sharing those proposals. And when you were speaking, I was thinking your proposals actually come into what many times we speak about called like a one-stop center, because these islands are spread out. So if you have a one-stop center, we have ably staffed police on the island, we have ably staffed court or state attorney, all these chains of justice put in one place, then it's easier for people to actually access justice even in a more timely way. When I think of what Detective Amy shared about the time for police to actually reach and be at the scene of crime, it is quite drastic how long it takes, and I believe there's a lot to be done around that. So thank you so much for highlighting some of these reforms. And as I move to his worship Dismas to also share with us some of the solutions that he thinks we should take on, whether policy or an activity or a practical measure which can strengthen the judicial presence in island communities. I just want to mention that for us listening, we need to understand that when justice institutions are stronger, citizens even trust the government better. And the issues we are talking about are gender and equity issues that cut across different sects of people. Some people even have cross-cutting issues that they face. Someone is from an island community, they are poor. In addition to that, maybe the person is a young girl or a woman. And then, there's a lot that cross-cuts beyond even the justice issues that we're talking about today. So over to you, Your Worship Dismas. What are some of the reforms that you think we should take moving forward? Having talked about the reality on ground and the challenges, what do you think would practically help us reduce at least these challenges, because I know we can't fully end them in a snap, but we can reduce them. Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you so much. I will start with, first of all, a clarification on what has been mentioned. We actually judicially launched a mobile courts system, and but that has not reached Namayingo. I think it has just been piloted out, and so that's why we do not have a speedboat. So my first recommendation will therefore be lobbying for or joining hands with development partners in regards to operationalization of the project of mobile court system, such that if we don't have a court on those islands, we could actually, literally, if we have that system in place, mobile court system, we would simply plan and say, we are going to camp on this island, maybe the whole of, say, July, we are going to be on the island for purpose of hearing these cases arising out of there. Actually, that is what I see, even as we plan for, or as we push for things to do with establishment of the court itself, and even appointment of judicial officers themselves on some of those islands. Yes, we have Seguro Island has been gazetted as a court, but it's not operationalized. I know that can be a process because it has a lot of logistical issues. Of course, again, I'm not speaking for the PRO, but also we know that we need it and it's not there. As we have already discussed, those are some of the gaps we are seeing. So we need to have to operationalize the mobile court system that has been launched by the judiciary. That has not yet reached in Namayingo. But also, in the long run, we will also need the physical presence of the court itself, because the mobile court would mean that you kind of have sessions there. The court moves there to have sessions. But once you have a physical court, we reduce on the distance. If people are filing cases, they can actually file within convenience from the islands themselves without having to go through these issues of transport. Should there be a problem with the ferry and whatever, that would be the permanent solution. So recommendation number 2 is construction of a court or establishment of the court. We need to lobby for establishment of a court on those, at least those 2 islands, Lolwe and Sugul Islands, and also to appoint a judicial officer there. But once we have the court, at least I know we are 2 judicial officers in Namayingo, one of us will extend services there. So that's what we need. That is in regards to address the gap of the gap of
yes.
physical accessibility by the courts. Of course, we also do not have means of transport to access those very islands, even as we talk of establishment of the court. So the other recommendation would be operation, kind of having the boats, the speedboat. Again, this is also a logistical issue. Yes, but you never know. Development partners may come in. We launched a mobile court system in which a speedboat was one of the items that were put in place to facilitate that, because you're not going to talk about a mobile court on the island without the boat. How are you going to get there? So we need to join hands in that regard, so that we can bridge that gap. So that the idea is the person on the island does not have to travel here, does not have to travel today to Namayingo in order to attend court tomorrow. That's sometimes what it means, because some islands are far off the mainland, and they take about 5 or more hours to travel, and they are programmed by the ferry. So that means that should the person realize that this time the ferry, should the person, for example, spend a longer time in court than the time of the ferry, that means should the person miss the ferry, he or she has to wait until the next day in order to go back. But once we have the court system, we have the speedboat, once we have the mobile courts in place, there we are able to bridge those gaps, and our people will access justice. I heard also colleagues talk about physical facilities lacking, but I think as a top of a one-stop center, as we think about all these issues, we also need to think about the GBV shelter. I know that courts for us, we are mainly concerned with if I'm remanding someone, the person goes to prison or whatever. But even the SGBV shelter is required in Namayingo. Because if we talk about sensitizing these people to report, these people from the island who are not reporting SGBV cases, as you sensitize them to report, the question is, these people are reporting against their own spouses, but they don't have their own alternative shelters. So as a report against the spouses, then as they go back to stay with the same perpetrators, we are not resolving anything almost. But once you have a shelter, the victims get the confidence to report, knowing that they have an alternative shelter to resort to in case there is a possibility of revenge from the perpetrator. That is also very important. We thank FIDA Uganda for taking the initiative to provide or to sponsor the PF3 forms. Yes, that is also one of the things I would recommend that we continue. We continue to have that in place. Yeah, basically, when it comes to, again, the issue of witnesses, case dismissals because of witnesses being unable to attend court. Yeah, thank you, FIDA Uganda. You have taken the initiative to sponsor the witnesses. But I wish there was a mechanism of helping to ensure that most of the people have access to such services. Because I see many cases actually are failing because of simply the challenge of transportation of witnesses. People are failing, litigants are failing to attend court because they lack transport on their own, and also they lack transport for their witnesses to come to attend the court. Again, we need to have this a policy issue also. We need to jointly lobby for juvenile remand home, because when you talk about Mbale, it's already too difficult for our people from the islands to come to the mainland court. Now we are talking about going to Mbale to follow up with the juvenile cases in Mbale. Of course, if for example, one is to apply for bail for a juvenile, you may have to go and see the juvenile himself or herself. So such kind of thing. There's need to establish a remand home to also reduce that gap. We need the remand
Okay.
home.
Yes, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you. I think again I will also
As you conclude.
As I conclude, I will also recommend that we need to still continue to join hands, strengthen the justice system by coordinating together, but also continue to sensitize our people. As State mentioned, State Esther, we need to continue to sensitize our people. FIDA is already doing that, but we need to continue with that, and I think we need to still, FIDA still needs to be supported to continue with the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. And you mentioned very pertinent, solutions, both policy, practical, and things that are already working that need to be enhanced. So we really appreciate you for sharing the reality on ground. And as you're speaking, I just thought of this famous quote by Mahatma Gandhi, that the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats the most vulnerable members. So beyond even the justice system, the courts, the DPP, and the police, what are other people, citizens doing? The development partners and institutions like FIDA Uganda can only do much, but it gets back to us as citizens. How much are we calling for accountability and for better governance in these areas for the vulnerable groups? So I'll get to our last panelist before I get to the audience. If you have any questions, you can feel free to type them in the comment section, or whether it's a question or comment or an addition to the conversation today. We are almost getting there. So in about 5 minutes or even less, Detective Emmy, would you share with us any practical solutions that you think police needs to be supported in? I know you mentioned some of them when you were speaking earlier, but in case there's any that you missed out and you want to emphasize a solution, whether it is policy, the work of police, or even the work to improve investigation and case management. Over to you, Detective.
Thank you, moderator. Maybe as police, we have a new model which is called the sub-county policing model. So the solutions are there. And one of the things we are doing in the sub-county policing model, all sub-county posts, they were uplifted to stations, fully-fledged stations. And they are supposed to construct structures there. Then deployment, at least every sub-county will be with 18 personnel, all department represented. Then they will be getting direct fuel, impressed, and also vehicles. I think for the case of islands, that's when the issue of boats will come. So what is now our management is doing in the police is to implement. But as you know, government work is very complicated. Implementation is gradual. It is not one day that you can implement the whole country. So every solution is in that model. That's what we are following now. Gazetting those stations, constructing them, deploying 18 personnel, all departments, getting facilitation direct. That's where the solutions are. Maybe with for us now on ground, what we need at the moment is to coordinate with the stakeholders, the local government, the judiciary, the DP office, then the NGOs, the local leaders, so that we can do the work as we wait for that model to be fully implemented. That's what I can give you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Detective, and well done on the sub-county policing model. I'm very interested in it. I'm sure I will reach out and have that conversation so that we see how it can even be used, by the way, in the entire country, to take on best practices from it. So, ladies and gentlemen, on this webinar, it's time for you to share any comments or questions. Feel free to raise your hand if you have any question or comment to give us. And for the panelists, please stay on board. After the questions, you might respond to some or just give us your parting shots. We are about to conclude with the webinar. For those that came in a bit late, we have been having a conversation about addressing prosecutorial and judicial gaps in island communities. And this conversation is in partnership of FIDA Uganda with the Embassy of Iceland in Uganda. So we really appreciate the government of Iceland for its continued support in access to justice. I'll just read briefly a few of the comments that I'm seeing in the chat. As anyone else who has a comment can respond. We also appreciate all the other partners of FIDA Uganda. I'm seeing on the call IDLO, FIDA works with the Austrian embassy and different other partners really who have supported the work that FIDA has done over the last 50 plus years. With us today, maybe just a sense, we have a few community legal volunteers on the webinar. We have members of FIDA, senior members of FIDA, we have staff of FIDA, friends of FIDA who have joined us and are passionate about issues to do with access to justice. And today specifically, we are spotlighting the island communities. So in the comment section, we have a comment from Bogere Steven. I think all of us are seeing that, from Namayingo, who says he appreciates his worship for the elaborate presentation, as well as Detective. They have talked about the reality. There is need for community sensitization to reduce on the ignorance on the island communities. And then we have a comment from Apio Enid. Apio Enid says GBV shelter is very critical. As his worship has stated, the survivors fear reporting because they fear the backlash. Most of the GBV cases have failed because of that. And then the last comment here is from someone who is tagged under the name of their laptop, I think Lenovo, unless it is their name, but their comment is actually it's a question. What cases are being dropped or delayed due to lack of witnesses or complaints to attend court or regular follow-up? Your Worship, I'm going to kindly request you to respond to that because you sit at the apex of justice within those communities, having gone through police, DPP, and different actors. We come to your chambers. So, what are the cases that are being dropped, and what nature of cases are most affected? I know you briefly mentioned that earlier, but please respond to that. What is the, sorry, I'm just continuing to read the last two questions before you come on board, Your Worship. And in case we do not have any other comments, we shall get into the conclusion. So the last two questions for you, Your Worship, or even state and detective, if you have a comment, you will definitely respond to that. The question is, what is the average case disposal time for criminal cases? I think this cuts across state and Your Worship. And then how do these gaps affect women's disputes differently from the men's disputes? That is a very good gender and equity issue that we can all probably respond to in our minds and think about, but also the panelists will respond to. So before Your Worship, you come on board, I had seen a hand up. Yes, Miss Damali.
Yes, thank you, Patience, for moderating. And I also want to thank our panelists for turning up for this webinar. I'm called Damali and I work with the Namayingo Field Office as the legal associate. Now, I have a question which I would want to seek clarification from the State Attorney of Lugazi and probably the district CID, Detective Amy. It's on this issue of confessions because we've had a number of issues. Okay, like Worship said, there is a lot of ignorance in this place where there is like a man who was arrested for threatening violence. He was threatening a 14-year-old girl that he was going to kill her if she doesn't give him his child. But when he was arrested, the parent came here to our office telling us that he was telling police that he wants his child. And he's demanding a child from a 14-year-old girl, which is defilement. So we were wondering, okay, in that scenario, where the suspect himself is admitting to defilement, yet he was taken on a different issue of threatening violence. Then also there's also another lady who came to us with the girl disappeared, but when the father went to report, they got the friend of the girl, and the friend of the girl said that the girl had gone with a man who is her friend. So the girl that had been defiled by that other person. But the matter was disappearance, but which became defilement because the girl is also 14 and in S2. So State and Detective Amy, I don't know whether you can comment on those two. I just say clarification in such instances.
Thank you so much for asking your question. And I think for now, let's have Your Worship. This must respond to the comment from Chisembo John on the issue of cases, the time for disposal, and then we shall come to detective, and then we shall end with state on the comments.
Oh, thank you so much, moderator. We are looking at, there's a question of what is the average time disposal for cases. Yes, now when it comes to it, depends on the category of the cases that we are dealing with. When we look at, for example, small claims cases that are filed under small claims procedure, under the rules actually and practice, small claims cases, once they are filed in our systems, actually our target is to dispose them within 1 month, strictly 1 month, unless when there are other factors like the witnesses are not attending, usually the claimant is not attending, but we strive to dispose of those cases within 1 month. Where we stretch, they're supposed to stretch maybe up to 2 months, but not immediately 2 months. And there are cases that are also slightly gone beyond that, but we have taken efforts and we are putting in such effort to ensure that such cases do not go beyond 2 months, small claims. But the ideal is 1 month, and that those actually were disposed within 1 month, small claims. Now, when it comes to these other cases, generally other small cases, ideally they're supposed to be disposed of within 6 months as a standard practice. But of course, it also depends on a number of factors, failure to attend by the parties, mediation process taking long and all that. And then for criminal cases, they are supposed to dispose them off within about 4 months. But also in mind that after delivering judgment, after hearing the cases, we have a target of at least delivering judgment within 2 months, ideally within 2 months, if other factors remain constant. Thank you. I don't know whether I've done very well. Then there are also another question. I don't know if I'm supposed to answer both of them at the same time. There was that one of which are being dropped because of the parties. Yes, out of what we are seeing, these cases are made. We are seeing cutting across criminal and civil cases, including land cases, being dropped because of non-attendance of the parties. But we are seeing the commonest are criminal cases. Sorry, we are seeing the commonest are criminal cases. There have been the cases come up court, they are called several times. The parties are not attending, and we believe that sometimes the complaint are not to attend because they have settled out of court and they do not necessarily come to inform court. Again, because of the physical barriers, I want that some of these people find it difficult to travel from the islands and whatever. So along the way, they drop these cases by simply not attending court, so they are dismissing those cases. So the commonest are actually cases, and also specifically as I mentioned, cases involving juvenile offenders. The remand home takes forever to bring these juveniles back to court for trial. And as you know, as a cardinal rule, fair hearing, you cannot try an accused person in his or her absence, except if maybe the accused person has chosen not to attend the court. Those are the few circumstances where the court may choose to dispense with the attendance of the accused person. So once the juveniles are not brought by the remand home, we are unable to proceed. So we keep mentioning, and then time comes, we have to dismiss those cases. Those are the commonest types of cases that are normally dropped or dismissed because of non-attendance of the complainants or witnesses generally.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. And maybe you can also just give us your parting shots, any final word for us, the listeners, as in conclusion.
Thank you so much, and I did appreciate the Uganda organizing this webinar, and thank you so much, moderator, for this. It has been an opportunity to engage. I know this has been a continuation of what FID has been doing with us, the stakeholders. We have had a number of them, including accountability engagements among the stakeholders. We are doing well in terms of that, but also what is important is that we need to join hands to continue to lobby for policy change so that we can achieve better. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I will now come to Detective Emmy. Your response to the question that was asked, but also if you have any comments in general on what has been mentioned today.
Thank you, moderator. Maybe to start with the question of Damali. As we are discussing here, in our discussion, we have realized that the victim is a very important witness in gender-based violence cases. And for the cases cited, if a victim says, I have never had any relationship with that man, even if the man admits up to where, that case cannot stand. So the scenario she was asking, it was like that. So we went even extent of calling the parents, getting some senior women to see whether the girl was fearing just because of the shame and whatever, because the man was old. She said, no, I've never. And even the parents said, our daughter did not do that. So the owner of the child and the one who defied was a different person who ran away. So because this one was just admitting and threatening, alleging that is the owner of the child, we had automatically take him on the most appropriate offense, which was threatening. But that's how it came. Only I did not get the second question clearly. Maybe state if she had, she will comment on it. So my final word is that I also need to thank you for inviting me on this discussion. I pray that we continue cooperating so that our people can benefit from us. With that, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Detective, for sharing with us your final remarks, but also for responding to the question that was asked. I think a lot of the questions also have a run on to the DPP, Office of the DPP. So, State Esther, you have a lot of work to do in responding to the issues that are prosecutorial in nature. And then you can also give us your parting shots. Maybe State Esther, before you come in, I'm seeing Matthias Mangeni's hand up. Matthias Mangen, is it a comment or a question? And is it okay for you to just set it in a minute before we have State responding overall?
I've noted. Let me take.
Okay, then. So I think State, you can proceed and respond to the pending questions that were left and any comments.
Thank you, Patience. I don't know which questions are pending that have not been answered, but I thought that the detective has answered well the question on the confession, because it seems he was responding to a particular scenario that they have handled at Namayingo. But generally speaking, a confession, if extracted within the parameters of the law, is very admissible in court, recorded by an officer, AIP of the rank of AIP and above, but also even before a judicial officer, can be just responding to damage generally, that the confessions are admissible in court if they are recorded within the legal parameters. And then you mentioned that, if generally speaking, you come to report a different case, but out of it, another case arises. I think that police has the capacity to investigate, and if they investigate and the evidence is sufficient, then they can open up a new case. So if it falls within the parameters of the first case, they can be able to handle that case. It can be investigated. It is just really dependent on the availability of evidence. Because if the victim is insisting that they were not defied, I don't know how you're going to be able to proceed with that kind of case, even if you have a charge and caution statement recorded within the parameters of the law. It might be very difficult to sustain it in court. So maybe then you would have to know, but why is this victim becoming hesitant? Why is this victim covering up for the suspect? Are they intimidated? Were they in a relationship? So I think it would require a lot of further investigations, which the detective, I'm sure, knows can be done. I don't see any other questions. The others is why she responded very well, but generally speaking, the timeline of a criminal case, other than the ones at the High Court, is, I think, really dependent on availability of witnesses.
Of evidence, yes.
Yeah, because if you appear in court, plea is taken, and the case is adjourned. In the next hearing, if I have all of my witnesses, I can be able to hear them. And if the presiding officer, the trial officer, magistrate is available, or whoever is handling the case is available, or even the judge, if I am able to present my witnesses, all of them, then the timeline would not be an issue, especially for cases which are not of a capital nature before the High Court. So it is really dependent on availability of witnesses.
True. Thank you so much, State.
You can remind me, but I think those are
There's just one.
Yeah.
There's just one which has popped up when you were speaking, and I don't know if you have any comment for it. Generally, really speaking, someone is saying who is responsible for facilitating health workers as state witnesses. So I don't know if you have any comment on that, and if not, you can also give us your parting shots.
For cases at the High Court, cases of a capital nature, the state facilitates all kinds of witnesses, medical workers, the victims themselves, any other expert witness. Every witness that has been summoned to appear before the High Court is facilitated in criminal cases. In some cases before the lower court, the office of DPP has some very little money in interest, but it is usually not sufficient. So we in the lower courts, we do not have a clear mechanism of facilitating health workers or other witnesses. There's sometimes very small witness refunds. It is really dependent. Now, if a person is from Buvuma, I don't even think it's enough to take care of them. Now on to my parting shots. I thank you so much for organizing this webinar. Thank you. I think we have learned a lot from each other. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing, FIDA Uganda. You are really supporting SGBV cases, and we are grateful. We pray that you will continue. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, State. Thank you, State, and thank you so much, all the panelists, really, for sharing passionately about issues of justice delivery in the communities of Buvuma and Namayingo. A lot of what you said is going to trickle down into other islands, but also nationally as a whole. And I don't know, Abi Shiagwabwire, are you able to give us any final remarks from the team at FIDA Uganda, or Gloria can come again at a later time as we conclude? But overall, for those that have been here throughout the session, we appreciate you for your time. Thank you for being friends of FIDA. Thank you for being members of FIDA and stakeholders and funders of FIDA. FIDA continues to do its work, and it doesn't do it alone. It does it with a lot of your support, both in kind, cash, and with all these forms of collaboration. And today's conversation, I think we have been able to hear the reality on ground firsthand from the judiciary, from the office of the DPP, and also from the police. And we have been able to understand the challenges that are faced in the areas of Buvuma and Namayingo, especially for survivors of SGBV and other vulnerable communities in as far as access to justice is concerned, especially prosecution issues and the judicial gaps that are there. But we have also been able to identify some of the solutions, both practical and policy reforms that are in place. Some that need to be enhanced, and others that are unique ideas. For example, having one-stop centers on these islands to ensure justice is timely, but also that the chain of justice is not weakened or isolated. But above all, we have also looked at how we can enhance the mobile court system, construction of at least courts or establishment of these courts there, GBV shelters, the issue of PF3, the police form, has also come up, so much in this conversation. We have also had issues around the challenge of juvenile justice and the need to sensitize communities, but also the actors of justice in these communities so that services are enhanced. So at this juncture, if Abby is not able to give any conclusive remark, I think Abby, are you able to say hello and to conclude for us?
Hi, Patience. Abby might not be available at the moment, but I am
Okay,
to
Gloria.
conclude the session. Okay. First of all, thank you so much, Patience, for your time. And thank you so much for moderating this timely conversation. We appreciate all the speakers for making the time as well, for sharing their insight on how they're navigating gender responsive measures in the Buvuma and Namayingo Islands. And it's just also important to note that the Iceland project that we are actively implementing on these islands seeks to provide holistic legal aid services, psychosocial support, and economic empowerment interventions, while strengthening the capacity of women's rights activists, community legal volunteers, and justice actors to deliver gender-responsive services on these very islands. We therefore thank you so much for your input, your contribution. We've taken note of some of the things that FIDA Uganda would have to look further into to ensure that the vulnerable, especially women and children, are attended to and can access justice in a timely manner, given the challenges that the communities face on these islands. Thank you so much, team, for those of you that have managed to join us this afternoon. We appreciate your presence, we appreciate your time, and we are looking forward to many more webinars. And most importantly, we thank our donor, Iceland Embassy in Uganda, for enabling us implement the project and also offer support to the vulnerable communities in Buvuma and Namayingo districts. So this brings us to the close of the webinar. So it's a thank you once again and a good evening to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you everyone for participating.